Right, hello everyone, we're going fishing today, but this is like no trip that we've ever been on before. Let's go, this is going to be quite a mission. Right, so we made it across the other side of the pond and here we are in New Jersey, of all places. And I tell you what it is, we had quite an experience last night. We arrived on the plane, it was late, it took hours to get through security at JFK Airport. And we then arrived to pick up our rental car and drive about, like, it should have been an hour. How long was it? It wasn't an hour. Anyway, it was quite the adventure. We saw some interesting sights and we got a real taste of the underbelly. So we're off for breakfast now and hopefully things can only get better. What do you think of that for a breakfast? Quick look under the bonnet of this hire car here, because I've never seen a vehicle like this in my entire life. When I got into it yesterday, I looked at the amount of miles that were available and it said 250 and I just assumed, oh, like it must be half full, but it turns out the petrol tank was full but the range is 250 miles. Now it looks like it's a 4-cylinder engine. I was expecting like some sort of at least a V6 because it goes like a scalded weasel, but how miraculously inefficient is that? 250 miles up a single tank. That's appalling. Oh, somebody's playing a fish. A young guy, got a one on.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
Combat fishing.
Well, I told you we were going fishing, so here we are on the famous Salmon River for something that I've never experienced before. We're about to try combat fishing for the first time, so this is going to be very interesting. When we drove over that bridge there, we saw a young guy playing a fish. And it's going to be Chinook salmon. There's a drift boat down there. Chinook salmon probably that we're fishing for, maybe an early steelhead. But normally, apparently you can't even swing a fly, it gets so busy. But today, because it's a little bit quieter, at least we might get a chance to swing a fly and fish properly, as I would say. So my guide today is Joe, who's kindly, very, very kindly put my daughter and Rosie and I up on our trip here. We've been staying in his lovely home and he's going to be my guide today. So Joe's been fishing forever, so I think he knows what he's talking about. He showed me his fly tying bench and I was very impressed, I have to say.
Okay. You know, but I would try one of those, and then this is an odd fly and it doesn't look, I mean, it's not the color of an egg, but with overcast like this, it's going to present you know, a darker.
Okay.
I would give that a try. But swing your Calvin for a bit and see how you put that in your pocket. just to handle the weight of the tarpon. It isn't the hook that goes bad when you're fishing big fish.
Yeah.
It's how you manage them, basically.
Have you caught many tarpon yourself? Yeah. What's that like?
Yeah. My biggest one's 130 pounds.
Wow. And how long did that take to get in? I bet it didn't come in easily.
45 minutes.
Wow.
My dad bought a house in Fort Myers area, and it was canals like Venice, all canals out to the river. And the tarpon used to come in and daisy chain right in front, But you were on a canal wall, and about 5 foot to 6 foot off of the water.
Yeah.
And the water was too deep to wade. So what I used to do is I'd put in my last section of my leader would be like 12 pound.
Right.
And then I'd put a bite tippet, a 50 pound on, so the abrasion from the side of the fish wouldn't break me off. But I'd throw I'd throw it out and I'd hook a fish, and he'd get to the point where I couldn't do anything with him, and I'd pop him off. I'd break that 12 pound line, and the fish used to tail walk right down the canal. So my father's neighbors would say, "Joe's here." got tail walking tarpon coming down.
Okay folks, I'm fishing with an Ovis Clearwater 6-weight switch rod, and I've brought my own reel and line with me. So I've got a Calvin shrimp on, just to see if a home fly works here. Yeah, I'm getting down. If I was a fish, that's where I would be.
know it's against the nature.
Go on.
Look at that flying like a sack of eggs. Just try and deadlift
Okay.
a bit. You know, you can swing if you want.
Okay.
But try and deadlift because they're going to see it as a sack of eggs. Okay.
And then let it swing on the end. This is quiet today apparently, so God knows what it must be like when it's busy. Joe, my host and guide, refuses to fish in the Salmon River. This is not his cup of tea, but he was quite insistent that I try it for the experience. So I dead drift and fly to try and make it look like a sack of eggs. So obviously with the Chinook salmon having started their run and the run's well underway, the eggs, they spawn and then the eggs come downstream and then the steelhead follow them up. Now it's probably a little bit early for steelhead, but you know, never say never. And I'm hoping that by fishing my Calvin shrimp, they're probably not likely to have seen a fly like this before. So we shall see how the theory holds up. I do have some egg flies tied by Joe that I can use as an alternative, so we'll try one of those later on, I think.
Aha! Well, we'll be surprised to see them.
Awesome. Like, really? Yeah, from the AT&T.
Receipt in here for the warrant.
I thank you dearly.
So this reminds me of my fishing life at home, except I would be the first person breaking the trail. That wouldn't be an existing path. Maybe no, I should put a heavier fly on. Give it one more cast to the main, then I'll put some of the weight on. I didn't, but I do have a weight. I've got some weighted nymph. I'll stick one of those on. It's not the ones you see that you catch.
Oh, a little bit, yeah. Whoa. Hold on. Let me see if this is right. Oh. You're not gonna run away on me. So much line on it. No wonder I was freaking vibrating this bastard. Oh, sorry guys. Oh, I'm out of here though. That's my limit for the morning. Holy shit, tell me that thing didn't almost get away. Gotta put that hook on my hat. Oh, I'll show you. I'll save it because that sucker's going on my hat. I don't think I can hook it into my pole. Alright, thank you guys very much. Well, what do you guys do your carry?
That's a big fish. That's what we would call a kipper. You know what I mean? You know what a kipper is? It's just,
Yeah, I know what a kipper is, but that,
oh, there's a big one out there. Look. Goodness. Oh, that was a steelhead. Yeah, it was a good one as well, wasn't it? Watch of that. Oh, there's thick cracks on it.
and Mike was saying that they used to put close to 1 million fish in each one of those things, figuring that 50% of them come back. I'm gonna get to you, guys. That drives the spawn. I mean, he'll kill himself. He'll beat himself to death.
Yeah, it must be like being a teenager times 10. That was shocking how much lead was on that ride. That was ridiculous. That is just out and out snatching. That's not fishing at all.
When this first opened, they allowed snagging fish.
Alright.
It was allowed to snag.
Okay.
They said they're going to come up and die.
I guess I can see the argument in that. I suppose, you know, if you're prepared to eat them, you know, that's...
They come up with what?
But if people are crazy enough to want to eat them, I suppose, you know, I'd rather see them eating them.
Yeah. There you go.
So this is Niagara Falls plunge pool, and look at this thing. Isn't this incredible? It's like the biggest salmon holding pool in the whole world. You can absolutely feel the force of the water even from up here. It's amazing.
She won't let me take a picture of her anyway.
is that? Oh, I can see the diabetes already. It's
Look at the whole thing.
I can see the diabetes forming in it.
And if there's no better endorsement.
This is the Rescue the Republic event in Washington DC, and this was never really a fishing trip. The fishing was just incidental. I really wanted to come and hear some of the speakers. Jordan Peters has just taken the stage and just starting to speak, and later on hopefully we'll get to hear Robert Kennedy Jr.
Explain to you what happened to your august institutions of higher learning. So I've accused the universities, let's say broadly speaking, of falling into the hands of the postmodern neo-Marxists. And so I want to walk you through that, because whether you know it or not, it deeply affects your life. So what's happened in the last 30 years, not least in the field of literary criticism, which I suspect isn't high on your list of priorities, but the thing is, it's crucially important, you see, because it turns out that we live by stories. Story appears to be something like the description of the value structure through which we look at the world. And you know, people are very attracted to stories. We're trying to get our story straight here today. We're trying to get the story of the country and the West straight. Stories matter. So it turns out that literary critics matter, because they assess and analyze stories, and if they do that badly, or in an ideologically biased manner, it turns out to matter far more than anybody might think.
Freedom of expression in the First Amendment, because of all of the other rights are dependent on it. A government that has the capacity to silence its critics has license for any atrocity. So the First Amendment was the most important right. And now, as soon as they figured out that we were going to put up with them silencing dissent, they began their attack against all of our other Bill of Rights. There's three legs in the First Amendment. The first is freedom of speech. The second is freedom of worship. They closed every church in this country for a year with no scientific citation, no public hearing, no notice and comment rulemaking, no environmental impact statement. All the protections and safeguards of democracy that I've been litigating for 40 years against companies and governments when they try to skirt those requirements, suddenly they all just disappeared. And one bureaucrat who'd been there for 50 years, you know who I'm talking about? He just said, close the churches. And that was it. And then they went after the third leg of the First Amendment, which is freedom of assembly. They told us, again, with no scientific citation, we have to social distance from each other. We can't assemble. We can't petition and protest in groups. And nobody had ever done that before. Again, there was no hearing, none of the safeguards of democracy, and then they went after Fifth Amendment property rights. They closed 3.3 million businesses in this country. They closed little businesses, but they left Walmart open, and Facebook, and Amazon, and all the big tech companies that were profiting from the pandemic and from all these closures. Only the worst tyrannies in the world, people like the Taliban, like the Iranian government, spiritual, creative, independent human beings into a faceless mask of compliance and obedience. And then they went after the Seventh Amendment, which guarantees jury trials to Americans, and here's what the Seventh Amendment says. No American shall be denied the right of a trial before a jury of his peers in case of controversies exceeding $25. That's all it says. There is no pandemic exception. And the framers of the Constitution knew all about epidemics. They wrote the Constitution for hard times, not for easy times. They wrote the First Amendment not to protect the kind of speech that everybody wants to hear that doesn't offend anybody. They wrote it to protect the kind of speech that offends people that we don't want to hear. They wrote it to protect misinformation and disinformation and lies. And Louis Brandeis said that the remedy for bad speech is not censorship. It's never censorship. It's more speech. Do you consider the First Amendment to be a privilege? Do you consider it to be your right? Your God-given right? Do you want to elect government officials who are going to take that right away from you? No! Who was the biggest perpetrator? We now know, and everybody admits. Who was the biggest perpetrator of misinformation during the pandemic? Did you say Anthony Fauci? No, it was the government of the United States. So we don't want the government. We don't want to give the government power to censor other people's misinformation while it perpetrates its own, do we? No! Brown University closed all its schools. Brown University studies that our children, our toddlers in this country, lost 22 IQ points. A third of children are now going to be taking remedial education, and many believe they will never recover. The GMAT scores are down. All the scoring by IQ and our children's intelligence are down. Isn't it a terrible, terrible blow to our country? And what was the point of it all? Well, we look at what the outcome was. And the outcome was that they shifted. They closed all of the small business in this country. 41% of black-owned businesses will never be open. They shifted money upward. They strengthened these big tech institutions like Amazon and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Google. They shifted $4.3 trillion from the American middle class to this new oligarchy of billionaires, which is the biggest outcome, the biggest shift in world history of wealth. And they shifted power. We gave our government all these new powers. And I want you all to remember three things. Three rules. One is that when you give a government a power, it will never voluntarily relinquish it. Second rule, that if you give a government power, it will ultimately abuse that power to the maximum extent possible. And the third rule is that nobody ever complied their way out of totalitarianism. What are we going to do if they try it again? Resist, resist, resist. What are we going to do? Resist, resist, resist. We enriched all of these corporations. and their captive agencies, and now want to go and commoditize all of the things we value in our lives. They're commoditized the Constitution. They have turned the courts into servants for authority instead of the servants of the people. They've commoditized the press and turned the press away from the First Amendment and into propagandists. They're commoditizing our landscapes. They're commoditizing our health, and they're commoditizing our children. And the biggest beneficiary of the pandemic was, of course, the pharmaceutical cartel. And if you're a part of Big Pharma, the most valuable asset in this country today is a sick child. And so they want to keep you, they don't want to kill our children. They just want to keep them sick and dependent on chronic disease drugs for the rest of our lives. And they now have so much power over this, the exemplary democracy of the world, that they have been able to make us the sickest country in the world. We have the sickest children in the world. When my uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Today that number is around 60%. When my uncle was president, I was a 10-year-old boy. We had 3.4% of Americans were obese. Today, 74% of Americans are obese or overweight. Autism has gone from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in every 34. 1 in 10,000 in my generation, 1 in every 34 in my kids' generation. Juvenile diabetes, which when I was a kid, the average pediatrician saw 1 case over a 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 children who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. Our fertility levels are plummeting. Since 1970, when we were leading the world in longevity, we've lost 6 years compared to Europe. We spend 4 times per capita what Italians pay for healthcare, and we live 7.4 years less. So we are commoditizing ourselves. We're destroying our country, including our national security. 77% of our children can no longer qualify for military service, and it's costing us $4.3 trillion a year. It is an existential threat to our country. Our food systems got transformed in the early 90s. The tobacco companies were loaded with money, but they were under attack from lawsuits and from scientific revelations and government hostility that was eroding their consumer base. So they began using their excess cash to buy all the food companies in our country. By the end of the 1990s, the 2 biggest food companies in the world were Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds. They took all of their scientists that they were using to make tobacco more addictive, and they brought them over to the food industry to find ways to make food addictive. And they invented all these new chemicals in laboratories that were not the product of nature. And they put it in our food. Our bodies do not have the capacity to process like you do this in Europe. We have 1,000 ingredients in our foods because of the capture of these agencies that are illegal in Europe. So they're making the kids sick, and they're making money on it by addicting them to poisonous food. Now, I'm not even say food. Food-like substances. We need a president who's going to come into office in this country and who is going to dismantle this corrupt merger of state and corporate power. You deserve a president of the United States that is going to protect our children. our constitutional rights, our freedom of speech, our freedom of worship, our freedom to assemble, our right to jury trials, our right to be free from unwarranted searches and seizures. And don't you want a president who's going to make America healthy again, and who's going to make America free again, and who's going to make America once again the greatest nation and the moral authority around the globe. And you need to go to the poll and get the president out and get Donald Trump and me into Washington.
So folks, that was the real reason for this trip. I didn't really come here to go fishing, although that was just a nice incidental little bonus. So this event was called Rescue the Republic. The idea was to bring as many people as possible, just to show a show of support against a lot of the awful corporate corruption that's captured the US government. I'm not going to be able to vote in this election, but I realise that this election is a tipping point for the West. The US has got the strongest constitutional rights in any democracy in the Western world, and they've got their laws and they've got their right to free speech and right to bear arms and the right to assemble in large groups to protest, absolutely enshrined in law. We don't have that in the UK. We've already lost our voice in the UK. In the UK you can get put in prison for putting a Facebook post up, which is just pure and utter tyranny. And I just hope that in the upcoming election it goes the right way. And this awfully corrupt, disgusting group of politicians stay in power and continue the absolutely disgraceful slide of society that's been happening in the US and in the rest of the Western world as well. Well, I think we're all lost, so I hope that we get the right result in November. Like I say, it's not my fight, but it is, because we all are down the line of the US policy. If the US sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold, and I can already see the slide in freedom of expression in Britain, and it really terrifies me as a parent. I hope that corporate capture is removed from politics and that we once again go back to a really democratic state where the government represents the people and not the other way around. Anyway, that's my 2 pence worth, guys. I know this is a fishing channel, it's not about politics. I hope you guys on the other side of the pond feel the same as me, and I hope that you vote the right way for the good of us all, for the good of the whole of the West.